My three biggest takeaways from his testimony so far in the trial against Donald Trump. One, let's talk about verbs. What seems to have been established in day one of the testimony of Michael Cohen was that to some level, Donald Trump was aware of the negotiations and agreements that Michael Cohen was quarterbacking to write NDAs, in more salacious terms, hush money, for stories that Donald Trump didn't want out there in the public through the National Enquirer, through the New York Times, through the media. And so Michael Cohen played audio, which we shared with you in yesterday's episode of The Will Cain Show. He gave testimony to the different ways in which he kept Donald Trump apprised of all of these negotiations. Now, the verb that I chose to use, which I think is probably the most accurate verb, is Donald Trump seems to have been, based upon direct testimony of Michael Cohen, aware. Now, I'm here to tell you this verb is important, aware. Because first of all, let's just talk about the role of media. Media is such a used car salesman of a business. I mean, you got to sit there and you got to parse every word. You've got to look at every nonverbal piece of content. You've got to look into someone's eyes. You've got to be aware of the ways you're being manipulated. Now, one that disagrees with me could say right now, Will, you're manipulating me by your choice in the verb aware. Well, I'm also being honest with you about the process of choosing this verb. Here's what I mean. I read CNN's review of the testimony yesterday of Michael Cohen, and this is the verb that CNN chose. Donald Trump was implicated by the testimony of Michael Cohen. Now, that is not small. That's not slight. That is certainly not semantics. That is designed to make the reader leap to a conclusion of guilt. If you are implicated in something, it is suggested that you are guilty of something. The weird thing about this case is we don't even know really guilty of what? Of signing non-disclosure agreements? Of being aware of these negotiations? Those are not illegal. So implicated in what? A fraudulent bookkeeping charge designed, importantly now, to manipulate a presidential election? I saw nothing in the testimony yesterday that implicated Donald Trump. Other verbs that are worthy of discussion and debate, and this is what should be happening, and I would assume if there's any level of justice, will be happening in the minds of the juror. Orchestrate. Cover up. Did Donald Trump orchestrate a campaign to shut down any stories negative to him that might interfere with his campaign for presidency? Did Donald Trump quarterback a cover-up of how that money was spent inside of the Trump organization? What seems to be established, what I think was accomplished yesterday by the prosecution, is that Michael Cohen's testimony might have suggested Donald Trump was aware of the negotiation of these NDAs, but it neither implicates nor quarterbacks nor covers up any sense that Donald Trump was hiding internally in his business the existence of these NDAs, which he may have been aware. Again, these are not semantics. Verbs are important for you and I to understand and how we're being manipulated when someone tells you a story, when the media tells you a story. But for a jury, those verbs lead us towards conclusions of innocence, not guilty, or guilt. Vivek Ramaswamy, former presidential candidate, who's also considered for the vice presidency, is in that courtroom today. He says, no one can tell you, as he's in the courtroom, presumably posting on X, no one can tell you what exactly Trump is being prosecuted for. After this morning's testimony from Cohen, it's now less clear than ever. There was an hour of testimony establishing that Cohen was the one who submitted the invoices that he said were false. If there was one person who falsified business records, that's Michael Cohen, which leaves Trump's alleged violation less clear than ever. And the choice of those verbs more important than ever. That takes us to number 2. Make boring great again. The crux of this case is not about whether or not there was the negotiation or existence of a non-disclosure agreement, NDAs. The crux of this case is how those were recorded within the Trump administration and whether or not they were hidden from law enforcement or the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, in covering up these stories. This is according to CNN's TikTok of the events yesterday, the testimony of Michael Cohen. Trump wanted the situation with Stormy Daniels to be under wraps until after the election. Quote, because if I win, it will have no relevance because I'm president. And if I lose, I don't even care. Trump said, according to Michael Cohen, making the payment. Cohen then said he spoke with Trump twice to get his sign-off before making the payment to Stormy Daniels using a company Cohen created, Essential Consultants. He said he would never have gone forward to the bank without Trump's approval. He testified he also let Trump know he signed the agreement with Daniels. This is the boring part of the trial, but this is the important part of the trial. Like, what was negotiated? Okay, so Trump was aware of the negotiations, but how was that recorded? This is fascinating if you understand the importance of boring. In early January, Cohen went to Alan Weisselberg, the CFO at the Trump Organization, about being reimbursed for the $130,000 he paid to Stormy Daniels. According to Cohen, they agreed Trump would pay him $420,000 in all, $130,000 to reimburse him for the payments to Daniels, $50,000 to reimburse him for unrelated tech services, $180,000 to account for estimated taxes. That's what people call a gross up. So he wants an X amount to come into his own personal bank account, so they gross it up for the taxes so he doesn't essentially have to pay the taxes himself. And a $60,000 bonus. The payments will be made over 12 months as like a legal services rendered, since I was going to then be given the title of personal attorney to the president. So this is the crux of the case. Was that $130,000 reimbursement misclassified as legal services in order to hide the existence of the non-disclosure agreement? Well, here's my question for if I were sitting in the courtroom, if I were cross-examining Michael Cohen, if I were sitting in the juror. If the allegation is the $130,000 reimbursement to Michael Cohen was hidden in order to influence an election, my question would be, what about the $50,000 reimbursement for the payment of tech services? I'll read directly from CNN. $50,000 to reimburse him for unrelated tech services. Well, those were part of this $420,000 payment. Were those therefore misclassified as a campaign use? Were those also not legitimately legal services? Is it all reimbursements that are not legal services, or only some reimbursements that are fraudulent transactions? To me, the fact that there are two reimbursements inside this one payment for legal services inoculates one set of payments from the other set of payments being called fraudulent business transactions. This seems to me like a normal course of business. And this is boring, but this is at the crux of this entire case. Make boring great again. Finally, number 3. What kind of dude is Michael Cohen? You know, everything you hear in the testimony, everything you read, like, he's a unique creature. I would offer to you that he is a very native inhabitant of the Northeast. Now, I think that we have these kind of dudes in other parts of the country, but Michael Cohen is most definitely a Northeastern slimeball, Chris, deal-making, wannabe dude. Every piece of testimony is about how he wanted to insinuate himself into any Trump situation, make himself more big time. He was always integral. He was the most important guy to Donald Trump. He was always spinning lies, puffing himself up. He was reportedly, according to Keith Davidson, the lawyer he negotiated with for the National Enquirer, despondent and depressed when he wasn't picked for Donald Trump's cabinet. And as I was reading this and reading about just how totally uncredible he is, like, how do you believe anything that's said by Michael Cohen? He's lied and lied and lied over and over again. Greg Jarrett, writing in Fox, FoxNews.com, had this to say about the situation prosecutors find themselves in. He said, Cohen presents the liar's paradox. The paradox is this: if a liar indeed lied, then his admission of his lies is truthful. Unless, of course, he is lying about the lie and everything else. You can never really know the search for the truth becomes impossible. In a court of law, where the central witness is a chronic fabulist, the liar's paradox equals reasonable doubt. Like, you know, if Michael Cohen walked in the room, how you would feel. You'd be like, I don't trust this situation. I don't trust him. He would come at you very, very confidently, you know? He would be big talking. And maybe that would have some effect. You know, you'd be like, oh, this guy really knows what he's talking about. This guy's legit. He's big time. But I think that lasts for a good half a minute. I think that's 30 seconds. And then your antennas go up. Like, okay, in Texas, in Dallas, this is Chris. This is a deal-making dude. You know, what you been up to, man? Oh, you know, I'm just working on deals. You know, got this big real estate deal over here. Got this. Have you seen my new car? Check out my watch. It's a little bit, it's very in your face that way. In Cohen's case, it's older because I think it's an older culture. It's been around for a while, so he's a unique creature. They're more bombastic, more pugilistic, more in your face. But still, what I'm getting at is whether or not you're from Orange County or you're from Florida, I know nothing about a guy like this from the Midwest. You have this guy. The bottom line is, after you get past all the bombast and all the deal making and all the big timeness, you realize this guy's full of it. I don't trust him at all. I would never want to be on his team. I think that's what kind of dude will come off to the jury. That is Michael Cohen.